We were pushing the papers into corners to be put into large trash bags at a later time. While it was piled up, I began to explain to KK why I was so happy to see the elevator. I don't have a lot of details, but I found out there are some esoteric constructs created by a coven of powerful witches in Astoria. They're not alive in a traditional sense, but they feel and grow and have desires, but they don't die. You can destroy them for a while, but they only form again elsewhere in a new form with no memories of their previous lives. So, essentially unstoppable to death, all they can be is contained. The Coven called them the Arcana and confined them to various places throughout all that is. They are marked with cards telling you what they are. My mother gave me two of the Arcana's cards, but the Arcana themselves are free and out in the world. However, I still have the cards with me, and I don't know how, but I can call forth their power from the cards. She even gave me a notebook explaining a bit about what they are and what they do. I pulled out my phone to show pictures I took of the notebook, specifically the part that told about the tower. The tower was kept within, well, a tower, representing disruptive change or dangerous revelations. The tower has the ability to create and open paths anywhere in Altus. Despite the tower's ability to create paths, it cannot actually leave the tower it is trapped in. But the tower could be brought to other places by the power of someone else. So, if I can help the tower escape, maybe I'll gain its ability to open paths to other places. Do you know how useful that would be? I finished telling KK, who finally turned up from scrapping garbage to look my way. Paths anywhere, even say in the Emperor's personal chambers? KK asked excitedly, and I shrugged. I mean, I assume so. Don't know why you would want to do that though. He'd be aerated and rotting long before you found anything interesting. I said without exaggeration. No one truly knew where the Emperor lived. It was known he lived somewhere in the Imperial Palace, but that was about as precise as saying your car was somewhere in the city. The Imperial Palace was over 8 square kilometers and one of the largest palaces in the world. Only a few palaces in the Middle Kingdom that exceeded its footprint, but definitely not in total area. There were bunkers and tunnels under the Imperial Palace that led all over Imperial City. Not merely the urban part of the city, nor the suburbs, but the entire territory of Imperial City. The full scale was obviously hidden from public view, but Mousers had discovered bunkers with the functionalities of mansions buried as far away as Shokanahage Mountains, hundreds of kilometers away from the Imperial Palace, and marked with the Imperial Seal. And the Emperor could be living in any of them, or he may not even be living in Imperial City. The Seven Cities didn't exactly have a good history with the safety of the emperors, and being related to the emperor only made you more likely to harm him, not less. But being related to the emperor also made you a target for enemies outside of the family. So it's not unreasonable for the emperor to have secrets within secrets, and bunkers within bunkers, to keep both himself and his family safe from threats both within and without. So, opening a path that led to a personal chamber that no one on Earth knew where it was and could possibly not exist at all, the best answer I can give is I think so. But we will have to find the tower first. The graffiti on the elevator suggests it's there. When I saw the hermit, it had the carving of the card on the entrance of the cave the hermit was trapped in. If I was to guess, that must mean the elevator door is the entrance to where the Arcana is kept. Sorry, I guess if I do it, I don't even know if you want to help, I said to KK, who only lifted a hand in response. I'll help you. Honestly, you're a good person, and I think I would have helped you even if there was nothing in it for me. But if this construct can get me to the Emperor's chambers, I would rip this entire tower apart nail by nail if I have to. So, do you really think it's behind the elevator door? She asked me, and I nodded. Once I did, she sat the bush broom down. Come on then, she said as I awkwardly followed behind her. Larry was still outside, and still smoking, probably going to keep smoking for a while, when we made our way back to the elevator. KK stood in front of it strong as she spoke to me. Don't tell anyone about what you're going to see, she said as she placed her hands on the elevator doors. At first, I didn't know what she was talking about, until I saw some of her bandages unwrap from her fingers and slither like snakes as they slid from her fingers and wiggled between the elevator doors. After a moment, KK pushed her arms apart, and I could hear the scrap of metal on metal as the elevator's doors opened, as the Killer of Kemet pushed her arms apart. After a moment, the doors were open, and beyond the elevator doors was only the darkness of the elevator shaft. Of course, I should have thought of that. If the power was off, the elevator would have descended to the lowest level. I explained that to KK, expecting her to be angry, or at least upset. She just nodded and said, That makes sense, and pulled her arms together, dragging the doors back into position with more noise. Once back in place, her bandages withdrew from the crevice between the doors, and they slid back onto her arms, and she caught me staring at the bandages. How strong are you? I asked her as she readjusted her PPE. Strong enough. Not as strong as I will be, KK answered before pointing back at the room we were working on. We should get back to the room. I don't know about you, but I want lunch today, KK said, walking back to the office. We spent a few hours pushing the trash into piles and then piling the desks and chairs to another wall. I spent the time deep in thought, trying to figure out how we were supposed to get down to the basement. The basement was off limits to us and the cleaning company. No power in the building meant I couldn't pull it up. Then there was also the fact that the tower had to be somewhere on this floor. But there was nothing as far as I could see. Tons of trash, some shredded files, and papers that were older than my father. Still, even as we pushed and moved items around, Larry never came back to check on us. After a while, we checked for him on the balcony, but he wasn't there. Naturally a bit concerned, I texted Mr. Mad to let him know that Larry, the man in charge of watching us, had vanished. Mr. Mad texted back that Larry was down on the ground floor, having lunch with everyone else. When I asked why we weren't included in the lunch, Mr. Mad just texted, Well, you weren't here, so we figured you were busy. Don't bother coming down, BTW. Larry grabbed your food to bring it up to you. I swore to myself and gave KK the news. Well, the good news, Larry isn't missing. Bad news is he went to lunch without us. But hopeful news, he's supposed to be bringing food back up to us? KK turned to face me and audibly sighed. Do you honestly think he's bringing us food? She asked me. Well, probably not, but what kind of man would go get lunch for himself and then refuse to get food for students he's supposed to watch over? I said rhetorically, while KK just stared at me and my stomach grumbled. Fine, he's probably already eaten it, I said as I kept slowly pushing the trash in the hallway into piles. Nearly an hour later, with my hands shaking from hunger, Larry finally came up the stairs. No food in hand, he saw us both staring at him, and he spoke. What? Did you bring us food like Mr. Mad said you were? I asked him. Larry only shook his head. If you wanted food, you should have come downstairs and had lunch with everyone else, he said with no guilt in his voice at all. We weren't told there was food downstairs. We didn't even know when break was. How do you expect us to just know it? I said, my shaking hands balled into fists from hunger. Well, in the real world, your boss isn't going to tell you when your break is, when to take lunch. You have to figure out the best time for yourself without interfering with work. Get used to the real world, kid. You're lucky your real boss would have fired you for being a smartass by now, he said, removing a water bottle from his vest as he drank the whole thing in front of me. Where are we supposed to go to the bathroom? I asked him, and he pointed down the stairs. Ground floor. You got 5 minutes to go and come back, he said, and I stared at him. Is that a joke? I cannot walk down those steps in 5 minutes. Tick tock, you got 4 minutes now, Larry said, and in desperation I hurried down the stairwell. The last thing I saw as I made my way to the stairs was KK looking directly at Larry. It took me 8 minutes to make it down to the ground floor, where I found the portable toilets. I also found several coolers full of water bottles, tea, soda, and even bags of chips for snacks. I immediately ate a bag of spicy chips and a bottle of raspberry tea. I grabbed 2 extra bags of chips and 2 bottles of tea before I made my way back up the long stairs. No elevated rise was built yet. Apparently, they were still waiting on parts to be delivered. So, most people over the 3rd floor didn't bother working, or they were helping out on the lower floors. So, the only ones who were asked to climb up the entire tower, because of the lack of an elevated lift, were KK and I. I sighed, putting the tea and chips in my coveralls as I climbed up the stairs. Finally on the top again, and with heavy breath, I saw the trash was all piled to the sides and in bags, with KK pushing the last bits of paper into one final bag. I got you some tea and chips, I said, offering her one of each, which she took eagerly, only to put it away in her coveralls. I'll eat them later, she said as I looked over the progress made. It still needed to be mopped, and the desks and heavy equipment moved downstairs, but it was certainly days' worth of work, all done by her, and her alone. Which reminded me, where is Larry? I asked, and she pointed down below. He went downstairs, said something about how he needed some propping up, so I am guessing he forgot a stash downstairs, KK said, wobbling just a bit when she spoke. Of course he did, but are you going to be okay? We should get you outside, I said, grabbing her hand and leading her outside. She followed, and we stood outside, breathing clean air and looking down over the buildings. It was a mosaic under the setting sun as the light above lightened and the lights below brightened. Far off in the distance, we could see the cathedral, sat in the middle of Cathedral City. The cathedral acted as both a central area of worship and central government for the territory. The Pontifex administered services of a religious nature, leading the many priests and religious figures in the 7 cities. He didn't serve any single religion. He was considered the highest religious authority for all religions in the seven cities. Second in power only to the emperor himself. He created broad rules for all places of worship and making sure at least one person, representing himself, was in every religious institution. Needless to say, it wasn't popular with the Abrahamic faiths, nor the old faiths. The seven cities had more religions than people, it seemed, and all of them had to be monitored by the Pontifex in some way. From what I understood, this Pontifex was mostly concerned with collecting tithes and keeping cults from growing dangerous, instead of monitoring what was taught. Still, though, the thought made me uneasy. Why would one man have final say before any god? He wasn't supposed to have an interest in outlawing any worship, but any worship that didn't see him as the final authority was, by definition, outlawed. It seemed a lot like him keeping an interest in outlawing faiths that didn't follow him as the final authority. Still, though, it wasn't quite as odd as the true cathedrals that only followed the Pontifex. From what I knew, most cathedrals outside of the seven cities followed Yeshua as the final authority on life and death. Some of them had their own version of a Pontifex that lived in exile somewhere in Europa. But overall, they followed Yeshua. That wasn't the case within the true cathedrals in the seven cities. There, it was taught that the emperor was the hand of Io, the god that all other gods obeyed, and the Pontifex was Io's voice. So, in their eyes, every other religion was either meant to serve Io, were secretly demons acting as false gods to draw people away from Io, or both. Their very belief system built into the seven cities government, and the freedom of religion went as far as under Io. Nothing could be above nor equal to Io. Even the idea of there not being an Io is forbidden to be proposed. And with every church, temple, shrine, and prayer circle in the seven cities monitored by the Pontifex, it was definitely off-putting. Still, though, I did enjoy the beauty of the city. Around the central cathedral, several other domes and arches were built that accentuated the sun as it set. The skyscrapers around it had stained plate glass that let pretty colors flow through. Most of the buildings were owned by the Pontifex. Even Temperance Tower, that we were standing in, was owned by him once, before being sold to my father's company. Still, though, there was a lot of light in this dark city, as I watched the sky turn dark and the ground turn light. What about you? I don't know anything about you, KK. I told you all about my life goals, but I don't know anything about you. I asked, and she looked over the city, also looking away from me. I'm not that interesting. I'm used to not having people ask about me. I don't know where to start, so I won't, KK said. We waited in silence for a minute while I sipped my tea. Well, you are pretty interesting. I just saw you pry open an elevator without any tools with prehensile bandages. I think you're very interesting, I told her. I wasn't sure, but it almost looked like she was smiling under her bandages. Thank you, High Priest, she said, still staring off, now opening her bag of chips, carefully placing them one piece at a time inside of her mouth. I couldn't hear any chewing. I wasn't always like this. Before my accident, my parents and my uncle called me the prettiest girl in the 7 cities. That was what I had to offer. I was pretty. I was an average student. I wasn't allowed to be an athlete except for exercise for modeling. I thought I was happy with it, but after it was taken away, I realized I was just trying to please everyone around me. When they were pleased, I thought it was the same thing as me being happy. I know that feeling well, I said, looking over at her, and she looked back at me, the dark void where her eyes should be focused on me. You do, don't you? She said, surprised. Her posture relaxed a little after that statement, and she continued her story. But there was a car accident. It killed my parents and coated me in flammable oil. Even though my life was saved by Vanguard, I was scarred and scared. My uncle ordered the doctors to do whatever it took to fix my face and body, so I could keep being his good little doll. Looking good is the same thing as being good, to him at least. But the things I was subjected to, it was worse than the car crash, and so much worse than the burning. It was like having every nerve in my body pulled out and replaced with electric barbed wire. Every bone was replaced with molten lead that would never cool. My blood was replaced with acid that made sure to scour away anything that the fire didn't burn away. By the end of it all, the only thing left of me was my bandages. KK looked down at her hands, and it sounded like she was crying under her bandages. But I could see no tears fall from her eyes. I I don't know what I am anymore. I am strong, I know that much. I control the bandages with ease, but I don't get tired, thirsty, nor hungry. I can still eat and sleep and taste, but it doesn't offer any sustenance for me. I don't feel pain, but I don't feel much of anything anymore. There's no real nerves left in me. I joined Agamemnon's because I wanted to get back at my uncle. Your uncle, the Emperor? I asked, and even though I couldn't see her expression, it was clear she was shocked that I put it together. You mentioned needing to get into the Emperor's personal chambers, and with how you speak of your uncle, it's clear you hate him. You want him dead, and I don't blame you, and I won't stop you, I told KK, who only hugged me in response. I hugged her back, a bit confused by how she felt. It was a lot like hugging a teddy bear, soft and fluffy with the gauze, but nothing solid underneath. So I was wrong. KK wasn't an exemy. She was an enigma, and my only friend. After the hug was over, I had to ask, KK, where's Larry? Really? I ate him. I didn't like how he was treating either of us, so when we were alone, I opened my bandages and consumed his entire body. What he knows, I now know too. So I know that his crewmates won't think much of it. He's been on benders that lasted weeks before, and no one liked him. On the entire team, no one even had professional respect for him. By the time they realize he's missing, they'll think he just no called, no showed. This cleaning company isn't exactly the most honest. They don't even have an alcohol nor drug policy, so most of the workers douse up during work. Most workers disappear without a trace at some point or another at this job. But yeah, he was an even bigger jackhat than you realized. KK chuckled while looking over the city. He wasn't intending on doing any work at all, but now it's time for us to get back to the others and back to the hotel, KK said, leading the way to the stairs. Shouldn't we bring the tools? Do you want to carry them in the morning? Yeah, no, I said, following my friend down the stairs. By the time we got downstairs, most everyone was talking and joking around. The clear difference between those that were cleaning and those that were just goofing off were clear, because the quiet ones were also the ones who did their work when asked. KK and I sat quietly next to each other on the bus while we were brought to the hotel. A two-star hotel. It had beds, bathroom, and a television. Wi-Fi was offered, but not provided most of the time. And naturally, my cheap father decided it was better for everyone to pair up for the hotel rooms. We were each given a meal kit and sent to our rooms. And my roommate, KK. Agamemnons didn't separate students by sex nor gender. Clearly, they didn't care here either. While I was certain at least a few of my classmates were going to be making bad decisions tonight, some likely permanent, KK and I didn't have such plans. After such a long day, we just wanted to shower and sleep. KK went first while I scrolled through Share My Day, looking at posts from an influencer in River City. Her thing was she was a fairy living in a world made for people much bigger than herself. But her punk aesthetic and blunt humor appealed to me. So, work said I was out of sick days. So, next time they wanted me to work on Monday Rush, I told them I had to attend a funeral. When my boss asked me whose it was, I told him it was going to be his funeral if I didn't get Monday off. I got the whole week off for that one. I was let go about 2 weeks later. They said that I kept wishing customers to have a day as nice as they were, so they saw through it. So, I told my former employers, I hope they get workers exactly as nice as they were. I chuckled at Fallen Grace's jokes when I heard the door open. I turned my eyes to KK. She was dressed in her pajamas, and she was still all in her bandages. But her bandages were now cleaner than they were earlier. At first, I was going to ask, but then I decided asking how hygiene worked with her was a great way to get slapped. So I quickly made my way into the bathroom and realized that the bathroom was dry. No leftover water in the shower, no water droplets in the sink, water on the floor. The towels were still folded and untouched, and the toilet was still sealed with blue tape. I have no idea what KK did in here, but it wasn't normal, that was for sure. Still, though, I put on some music while I showered and then brushed my teeth. Finished, I left the bathroom with my pajamas on and saw KK on her bed watching a news report about an outbreak of something on an Albion cruise ship. Her eyes stared blankly at the screen, and after trying to get her attention a few times, I realized she fell asleep watching the news. So I pulled up her blanket, turned off the lights and television, and went to bed myself, in the other bed in the room. My wireless headphones were in that allowed me to listen to my own stories while I gradually drifted off to sleep. In my dreams, I dreamt of a man in a red and gold uniform working as an elevator operator. Unlike other elevator operators, his feet were chained to the floor and his arm was chained to the handle that controlled where the elevator went. People came into his elevator asking to be taken elsewhere, and he would take them there. Even places that couldn't possibly exist in a building, like the beach, the OSS, the Emperor's quarters, and even to a certain point in the past. But despite all the places this operator traveled, he still wasn't allowed to leave, and he wasn't getting anything for all of his services. Not even a thank you. His form was growing more and more haggard, tired, and hungry as he went from place to place. But then, when he got to the point where I thought he was going to pass out, an odd boy entered the elevator. A boy with a long, flowing black dress that looked like it belonged to a quinceañera. He had golden eyes and a face that looked so familiar, but I couldn't place. He saw the elevator operator, and instead of demanding to go somewhere, he asked the operator, "Where do you want to go?" The golden-eyed child asked the elevator operator, who only sighed. "Home," he said in a soft and defeated voice. The boy giggled. "And what would you give for that?" the boy asked in a mischievous voice. "Anything," the tired man said. The boy nodded and extended a hand to shake his. "I can do that for you. Some day a boy will break you out of these chains. On that day you will offer him anything, after you are freed. Promise me that, and I promise you that you will go home again." The man eyed the boy suspiciously. "How will I know that he is the boy that will let me out?" the man asked, and the boy waved it away. "That's the easy part. He will have my face, but he will not have my eyes," said the boy who turned to face me. Now I recognized the face as my own, and those golden eyes dug deep into me as the golden-eyed child's echoed in my mind as I woke up. "Free him, free him, free him."